All right, here we go. Talk about the chapter 12 notes and lecture. First time doing this, so we'll see how this plays out, but hopefully you guys will get a good understanding of what I'm talking about in watching these videos at home. If you get to a point where you want to hear that over again, remember, hit pause, rewind. It's real simple to get in there and check out what I've said on these videos. So let's go through this and see how we do, okay? So, first thing that you guys need to understand is during the 1920s, shortly after World War I, there's a lot of struggles and things that are going on in the United States. Probably one of the first and foremost, we have nativism that surfaces, as well as isolationism. And let's go back over nativism. Nativism is the concept that you have this prejudice towards people who are foreign-born living in the United States. And this is a concept that begins to sweep the nation. People do not like the fact that foreign-born people are coming and taking the unskilled jobs. It was okay if we had a plethora of unskilled jobs in America that foreigners could come in and take, but now that the war's over, there's not a lot of jobs. Why? Because the soldiers, the returning veterans, are coming back from World War I, and they are the ones filling or wanting to fill jobs. So therefore, as more of these unskilled workers are coming in from foreign countries, nativism begins to pick up steam, and it's just something that begins to kind of plague America. The cost of living is going up in America. Women that were, again, at home are now working in factories. They're now being told that they have to go home. A lot of unrest. People are really uneasy. When you lose your job, hopefully you guys understand that's something that people have a hard time dealing with. The second thing that begins to kind of plague the United States is the concepts of isolationism. The United States during World War I, of course, got involved in the European conflict. One of the things that we as Americans wanted to deal with is our own issues at home. One of the questions says up here is, why did these things hit America? Well, again, Americans are dealing with the aftermath of World War I. People in general are looking at the inward problems, the numerous conflicts that are plaguing us as Americans. And as we look at our own problems, we realize we don't want to deal with the rest of the world's problems. We want to deal with what we have going on at home. So these are two of the first things that hit America during this 1920s era, post-World War I era. And hopefully we as Americans are going to grow from this. As you can see, we still have, maybe in today's society, we may have nativism again coming back into America. Think about some of our current issues on immigration. These are things that people throughout time go back to over and over and deal with, because different eras of time get plagued with, again, similar issues throughout history, and history repeats itself, as I said, over and over. So let's continue on. The next thing that we look at in terms of something that's beginning to happen in America is this Red Scare. And the Red Scare is something that came from the fear of communism. When you use the word red, that's something referring to the Bolshevik Red Revolution that was going on in Russia. And it's the reason why Russia drops out of World War I. They're dealing with these problems. But what began to happen is communism surfaces. And communism is the basis of a single-party system, a single-party government, where it's ruled by a dictator. And there's a lot of things that they want to change in their country. And those ideas began to spill into America. Things such as no private property, redistribution of wealth. These are all concepts that communists came up with, or the communist idea is about, that were spilling into America. And we did have a surgence of communists inside the United States, and there was communist groups, political groups that were growing. As some of these communist groups began to form, there were members of these communist groups that were from the United Workers of America, United Workers of the world. And these individuals were part of the unionization of companies, of the jobs in different companies, and large groups of people that were unionizing for better working conditions. Some of the finger pointing was at people that were involved in this because mail bombs began to surface inside government people. There were people that were sent companies that were sent mail bombs. A lot of people were pointing the finger back at these people that were involved in this communistic growth in America, and people didn't want that. As the unionization began to surface bigger and bigger, they began to see as that people saw unionization as the redistribution of wealth. Everybody's going to get treated fairly. Everybody's going to get same pay no matter what type of work you do. And that concept is something that was splashed over from that communistic rush. So we'll see how that plays on even further. This gentleman right here, A. Mitchell Palmer, he was somebody who was really involved in looking at this communistic Red Scare idea in America. And one of the things that he did in general was to go after and look inside different agencies, inside different unions, inside different companies, where there were people, there were anarchists that were opposed to government. And they began to kind of look at different individuals, and they would arrest people and they trampled on their individual rights. And it really had a backlash. There were protests by people talking about these political freedoms, and it was just a very trying time in America. And one of the things that really surfaces to bring this idea of the Red Scare and communism in America was the concepts behind Sacco and Vanzetti. During this Red Scare time period, foreigners were looked at, and they were pointed out, and they were singled out, and people's reputations were ruined. The ideas that their lives could be wrecked and ruined as well, because of the fact that they were foreigners, was something that was prevalent in America. Sacco and Vanzetti were two Italians. They are Italian immigrants that were living in America. They were arrested and charged with robbery and murder. And as the court case went on, a lot of people, and even people around the world, were saying that just because they were Italian was the reason why they were arrested. Just because they were anarchists was the reason why they were arrested. They went to jury. The jury found them guilty of their crimes, and they were executed in 1927 of that crime. Now, in recent time periods, the gun that was used in the crime, in the murder, was owned by Sacco and Vanzetti based on forensic evidence, based on the rifling of the barrels of the gun. So was that gun used? Yes. Was it owned by Sacco and Vanzetti? Yes, it was. It was involved in that. So it's hard to point out whether this was something that was a setup, or really it was something that was played out, or maybe it was that martyrdom, that idea to use these guys as the example that, oh, they're being treated unfairly because they were foreigners. Again, don't know exactly the makeup of everything in terms of what really went on. We weren't there. What the evidence came out in the trial was they found them guilty. And of course the evidence in recent times proved that that gun was used in the murder. So maybe it was justification for what was going on. But the people that were involved in pointing out that foreign-born anarchists, this communistic tie, were all tied together, could be something that people use this court case as that political fire storm that everybody was hoping it to become. So, all right, the next big thing that begins to happen is the ideas of limiting government. Nativism was again running rampant, and as fewer and fewer jobs were to be found, people began to stress out. And when there's no jobs, people want to point fingers. And people begin to point at the fingers. There's too many immigrants. There's anarchists, there's socialists, there's communists. All of these groups that were endangering the ideas of democracy and capitalism that America stands on was really what nativists were pointing out. And what begins to happen is we begin to put on certain different limits to countries. A lot of the limits, which is called the quota system, was put on people that were from the European countries. Those countries in general that were limited were the European immigrants, really kind of the southern and eastern immigrants that were in the later half of the immigration rush. And people felt that that was being very racist based on certain groups of Europeans. And The idea was they were trying to limit the amount of immigrants coming in. Immigration was exploding during that time period. People did not want to live in Europe. People didn't want to live in the war-ravaged World War I regions. They wanted hope, they wanted prosperity, they wanted to find a new idea. But because so many immigrants were coming in, a lot of nativists felt that we didn't have the jobs that they were going to need. We didn't have the things that would encourage people to come and prosper in America. They would just come and kind of lounge around and spill their ideas, these socialistic, communistic, anarchist ideas that were spilling out in Europe during this time period. So it's kind of a tough way to look at what immigrants were doing, but there's a give and a take. What side of the issue do we go with? Do we feel the sympathy of Europeans, or do we still feel the sympathy of natives in the United States? Again, it's an issue. It's what side of the issue do you have? So that's part of it. The one issue that a lot of people think about, again, going to the immigration issue that we have today, think about this. Immigration issues today, a lot of people think it's a Mexican issue or it's a Chinese issue. Maybe they are. Maybe those are the issues that we're looking at today. But back during this time period, even though we had a quota system, those were the countries that had free reign of immigration. You have 1 million plus Canadians that come over the border during this time period. They're allowed to immigrate into the country. So we didn't put the limit, we didn't put the quota system on the American countries, and those foreigners coming from the Americas were allowed to. It was the limits on Europeans, as well as the Japanese, as well as the Chinese, as well as just countries in general that were sending, tens of thousands, if not millions of people to the United States during this time period. And that's where the United States and nativists were really looking at and limiting those ideas. The next one is the rise of the KKK. Because of immigration, because immigration was on the rise, the KKK began to rise themselves. What began to happen during this time period is there was a huge recruiting aspect. You as a KKK member were told to go out and recruit 10 other people that would be part of the KKK. The idea was to limit immigration. If you weren't natural born, if you weren't Americanized 100%, living in America, born in America, and particularly white, your ideas didn't work in the American idea. So the KKK was rising in numbers because they were tired of seeing more and more immigrants coming in and changing the makeup of what America stood for at the time period. So that's how that rise during the 1920s occurred. What's interesting with it is you had in 1924 roughly 4.5 million members that accrued or made up the KKK membership. So look at the way that grew because of the backlash of what immigration caused. Now, of course, we know KKK, horrible, heinous type of group in terms of how they plagued their ideas. But at that time period, the KKK was trying to implement this nativist idea. And of course, yes, treatment against blacks as well, and other groups. So now if you think about the KKK today, it's not just blacks that are mistreated by the KKK, it's anybody that's not American in their idea. And what is that? Whatever the KKK's makeup is. But majority of the ethnic groups in America fall underneath the hatred realm of the KKK today. So kind of a weird entity that we still have living in America today. With that, I'm going to go ahead and come to the end. That kind of brings us to the end of our first video that you guys had to watch. I hope you guys enjoyed my lecture. Trying to do the best I can. Again, flipping the classroom is something that we're going to try to work on. And I'm going to have you guys watch these videos over and over. So as you guys log on to Google Classroom, which hopefully this is how you found the video, make sure you're using Google Classroom. Make sure you're also using my website. Remember, those are two valuable pieces to this class that will help you guys get involved. Remember, the website, going through Sultana High School, and again, finding my ugly face on Sultana website, click on that US website link. That's where you guys are going to find your makeup stuff. I have people asking all the time, where do I find makeup work? That's where you find it. If you can't find it in the classroom because we're out of copies, you're going to need to print them off on your own. Again, Google Classroom, make sure you're submitting your stuff through Google Classroom and getting your stuff up. I want your guys' grades to improve. So thanks for watching, and rock on.